What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Business is Pleasure. My name is Jonelle, and I'm here with Colette. She is the co-owner of the Karna Trading Company, and so am I. So if this is your first time checking out Business is Pleasure, this is where we take some time, review our week in terms of our business, see how things were going, and also our relationship as well. But the first way we always start off Business is Pleasure is, how was your week?
My week was good. I just worked on stuff leading up to our events. Got organized for our events. Nothing crazy.
Yeah, it's good. I kind of had a really nice weekend as well too. I like the fact that we're able to go to Montreal. We're able to hang out in a city that we really both enjoy and love. And that food, man, that food. So guys, there's this thing called a pate. It's not a patty. It's a pate. It's this Turkish pastry dish with ground chicken or beef in it, and it tastes incredible. So Colton and I, we feel kind of not cocky, I guess, bougie. So it's a pate. So that's our little thing. We didn't get a chance to have one while we're down there, but it's okay. But the thing that we love, I personally love about Montreal the most is the culture and the food. The food is incredible. You know, you can never have enough butter, and they do an amazing job with making sure all the food tastes amazing. So I was really, really happy to go to Montreal and everything. I really enjoyed it. And also just the event. The thing I liked about this event for the most part was that the location was really good. It was really central in a part of Montreal. So in terms of being able to talk to people and just the event being consistent in terms of traffic all day, it allowed us not to become overly bored or over the event. And I like how I didn't like though how it was curated. It seemed as if it was really female based in terms of the people that were there. There weren't a lot of guy sellers our stuff. So sometimes some clients would come in and they didn't feel as if there was a big enough variety of pieces to choose from. But it's okay, we were there, so we took care of all the guys for the most part, so which was really good. So overall, I thought the event went really good, and there's another one coming up shortly, so hopefully we'll be able to do that one as well. But overall, yeah, Montreal is always a great city. It's always a good time, and I think this is one of the first times where we went out of town for an event, and we actually got to enjoy the town for a little bit. So we got to eat, of course, when we're in Montreal numerous times. So it was nice. I had a great weekend.
Yeah, I think it was a good weekend. The thing that I like about Montreal is a completely different culture, right? So you kind of have the ability to appeal to a different group of people. I wouldn't say completely different culture, but it is a different vibe, especially when it comes to vintage. They have a different overall aesthetic. They're more so into the vibe of vintage as opposed to the actual brands and stuff that we would associate with vintage here in Toronto, I guess I could say. They're a little bit more chill, a little bit more relaxed, and it also gives us the ability to sell more, I would say, in a sense, because but not necessarily more, but sell a different variety, I would say, because you have people that are just interested in things that people in Toronto are not necessarily less interested in, but yeah, no, actually that's true, less interested in. So
yeah, because I think in Toronto, one of the major things about the vintage community here is that it's really brand dominant. So if you have a crazy brands like Polo, the Tommy Hilfiger, the vintage Nikes and stuff like that, in Toronto anyway, people are more likely to just be attracted to those brands. But I feel in Montreal, it's more so the style they like. They like the structure of a particular shirt, not necessarily the brand. They like the materials, or just even the styling of the way a certain pant or jacket is, you know what I mean? And I think we've talked about this before. That's the type of fashion we really enjoy. We understand that style is really dope when you can create it and make it your own, and you could become an individual through the vintage style. But in Toronto, of course, it's more so hey, I have more brands, so I look cooler, or I have more brands, so I'm the better dresser and stuff like that, which is fine. At the end of the day, it's everyone kind of has their own reason or rhyme why they dress the way they dress. So in Montreal, I think I was able to appreciate a lot of the style a lot more, because of course it was representative of what I like, you know. So my opinion is totally biased, guys. So if you are someone that loves big brands, do your thing. It doesn't matter, because that's a majority of our clientele anyway, right? So I think that's always good, and everything, you know. And I think it just goes to show that no event is the exact same, right? And it's funny too, because maybe even next time when we go back there, we might even get a different clientele that comes in. You know, maybe they'll be able to garner a different clientele that loves all the big logos and loves all the hyped vintage stuff, right?
And it also depends on the demographic of like the actual organizer too. Because like for example, we did an event 2 weekends prior in Montreal, and it was still had a little bit more of that like vintage style vibe, but it also still had a bit more of the like actual vintage brands and streetwear and stuff like that as well. So it also depends on the demographic of like the organizer and the people that they reach out to, and who pays attention to them enough to come to their events. So it kind of depends. Like honestly, at the end of the day, like we said, like every event's pretty different. You can't really guarantee that you're going to get a certain type of demographic or a certain type of clientele. You just kind of have to go with it and see how the day plays out. And that's why it's always really good when you're at an event or when you're preparing for an event to have a pretty good variety, right? Because you want to be able to appeal to every type of client that you may have. If you have just specifically one type of clothing or one type of vintage, it's going to be hard for you to capitalize off of the whole market itself, right? So
yeah, and I think even with us like adjusting the way we present the clothes a bit allowed us to actually even sell more or even appeal to more clients, like what you're saying, right? For instance, before we used to have the jean table, we'd put the shorts there, the jeans there, the long pants as well. So we'd have like all these different pieces of clothing all in one place. That made it look a bit too busy. But now the jean shorts, the nylon shorts, and like the nylon pants, we hang those up, you know? So now we're allowing ourselves, one, to allow the clothing to be presented more neatly and in like a nice, crisp fashion. And two, now we're allowing ourselves for people to buy multiple items. Because let's say you see a t-shirt, you're like, oh crap, those pants or those shorts go well with this t-shirt. So we're allowing our return on investment or like units per purchase to be a lot higher. And the good thing about it too, now we're attracting a larger audience base as well too, right? Because before, a lot of our shorts, they were like thrown in the back, or a lot of pants we wouldn't put out just because we didn't have the space. But now that we have the space, we're attracting more people, and it's just giving us a bit a higher probability for people to purchase items from us. And I think that's one thing, like essentially what you're trying to say is that like when you do see an event, maybe try to look at previous events that they've done, so you can kind of see what type of vendors were there, what their audience kind of is wearing, so you can really accommodate those people who can potentially come. And one thing I did like about this event, I think more than others too, I think it was two things. I was gonna say I liked how like a lot of the vendors were like really friendly and coming to our table, but I think that might have been a result of the bathroom being right next to us. Like, you know, like a lot of vendors kind of had to go to the bathroom. So like, oh, well, I'll just talk to these guys and, you know. And a lot of people that were actually just so nice, so friendly. And that's one thing I really do like about Montreal. In Toronto, it's like a big city. So people are less fast-paced, quick, don't really have the time of day for you sometimes. But I feel like in Montreal, they'll give you 15, 20 seconds, like, you know, see how everything's going, really polite, really well-mannered. So I do like that a lot.
yeah, it's a lot more like personable, or like small town feel, as opposed to like Toronto, for example. Like at least when I interact with people and when I'm in Montreal, I feel like I'll probably run into them again. Whereas like sometimes when I interact with people in Toronto, I'm like, yeah, I'm never gonna see you ever again.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because like Toronto almost has a population of 2 million. I think Montreal is like maybe just a bit over 1 million or whatever. So like, I would assume that like our vintage scene is maybe twice the size of theirs, where theirs is smaller and a lot more niche. So of course, I think like if we're constantly in those same circles, we are definitely gonna run back to those same people. And I think that's why it's important to always be consistent with everyone, because with a lot of the events that we're doing, we'll see the same audience over and over and over again, you know. And I think if we are to like stop being consistent or stop being like the people we are online and offline, we can really like throw some people off, right? It's like, hey, one week we're like these nice, jolly people that are selling this type of clothing. Then next week when we come back, we're totally different. Now we're being assholes. It's like we also have to understand, it's like, hey, we're here representing Clarendon Co. So whatever is going on between us, whatever is going on between the day, we're not happy or whatever, we always have to make sure we stay consistent for Clarendon Co. and the business.
And I think it's just who we are as people. Like we're never gonna not say hi to someone. We're never gonna not interact with someone. Like we, at the end of the day, like yeah, we're there for business, but we're also there just as like people. You know what I mean? And it's like common courtesy that when someone walks into your vicinity, you should say hi. You should acknowledge them and interact with them if that feels normal in the situation or moment, right? So I feel like we're not. It's not like we're forcing it. Like we're not being people that we're not. we're just being who we are, and we are Clarendon Co. So
Yeah.
that's how it kind of translates.
No, no.
And I feel like back to our layout, the way that we had it laid out, I think also really helped as well, because we had space. And I feel like that's one of the things that sometimes we forget about when we're doing events is like the layout actually does matter.
Oh, 100%.
If something is like too crammed, or like things look too squished together, or things don't look organized, or things don't look like we put time and energy to make it look presentable, then that's one thing that's already going to off-put people before they even started looking at anything. So like we had so many comments throughout the weekend, like people being like, oh, like we like how this is set up, we like how it's organized, it's nicely like color coordinated and stuff like that. And I feel like that's putting a positive foot forward for that person to go look through or like pick whatever they might like, right? If it's not organized, if it doesn't look aesthetically appealing from the beginning, people are more likely to just walk away.
And I think one thing I really liked about our display as well is just that like you will attract your particular audience how you present yourself some of the time. You know what I mean? Like, hey, if you're a gold digging girl and you're looking for someone with a lot of jewelry on because you think they have money, of course, like, you know, they'll attract each other. And I think like the way that we present ourselves, the way we present Clarendon Co., and the way that we display our clothing allows us to attract our audience and our demographic. You know what I mean? Because there was some stuff that I saw at the event. I was like, holy crap, like this shit's amazing, like, you know? And that attracted me, like, you know? So I think like it also works for our best interest as well too, when people will be like, oh crap, like this stuff is so well laid out, and I could tell by the clothing and the textures of it from just by looking at it that it may be something that interests me. And I think that's one thing you always got to take into consideration when it's like running a business, especially when you're running a business in person. I think the idea of running a business online is totally different, right? For instance, like when you're online, you don't necessarily have to like always say hi to people because you don't know who's coming, I guess, like more or less in and out of your store, right? And also like you don't need to ask and online, you don't need to ask someone like, hey, how you've been in our store for 20 minutes now, how are things coming along, you know? So that physical interaction is a lot different online compared to in person. And I think the way we translate that is really well. For instance, like when someone messages us about an item online, we don't take an hour to respond. We try to be as punctual as possible. When someone in person now comes by, we ensure that we try to be as polite as possible, say hi, just, you know, just try to be as engaging and endearing as possible as well too, right? So I think if someone was to speak with us online and then shop with us in person, it would be like a really smooth transition. And that's why I think it's so important to be consistent. You know, that's how we build our brand, that's how we build our name. It's like, oh crap, like I talked to these guys and I seen their videos online and like they seem really cool and chill, and then when I go in person they're the same people, you know?
And I think also part of having a small business is that like people are shopping with you because you have the ability to connect with them and to interact with them and
I think a part of it is that.
Yeah, part of it, and share an experience that they wouldn't necessarily get by shopping at the mall or shopping at a big like brand or department store, right? So like I feel like we need to like validate that for people, because a lot of the times like that's what they're looking for. Like when someone is like, hey, like can you take a better picture of this, or can you take a close-up picture or whatever.
That's them asking like, hey, can you give me a size small?
Yeah, that's and they're reaching out to us because they have that one-on-one contact with us, as opposed to shopping at like some random store online where it'll take them 48 hours to get back to you. You know what I mean? Like they want that quickness, and at the end of the day, like that quickness and that customer service, it's to our advantage, because on your phone there's so many easy ways for someone to get distracted, right? So if we can answer them quickly, give them whatever they need, and they can pay and purchase whatever there, it's even better for our business as well. So.
No, 100%, man. And I think that's one of the things that people don't talk enough about in small businesses. Just how consistent are you being in every aspect of the business? And I think that's one thing that's extremely, extremely, extremely important. Consistency has the potential to breed a lot of success, but the hardest part is just that, staying consistent as much as possible. And I think with you and I, we've kind of realized that like, hey, we want to give ourselves enough grace, but still keep ourselves accountable when it comes to like not remaining consistent, you know? So I think like with us, especially this next quarter, because for me, like June 1st is like a brand new half of the year, So like a lot of the things that I think worked well, let's double down on that. You know, like marketing worked extremely well, creating content, doing shows worked extremely well. You know, but then of course there are other aspects that's like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't do these things because it's not working as well. For instance, like um, some of the products that we picked. Maybe we should stay away from that stuff. Like all of those windbreakers that are like 90s, 80s style, they were working really well earlier in the year, but now not as much. You know what I mean? So I think like we just need to reposition the business and just do like slight changes in certain things just so we can remain successful. And I think that's one thing like sometimes like a lot of people don't think about in terms of the business is like, hey, are we doing enough reflection for the last 6 months, last year and a half, what was working well, and what can we just change or fine tune just to ensure that we continue the same rate?
Yeah, and for me, like I agree with all of that, but I think over the next like 6 months, I feel like we need to not over the next 6 months, but like you said, we should look back on the previous 6 months and see like what are all those like little small tasks that like we haven't been able to get done, but it takes not really that much time at all. It just takes us thinking about it, focusing on it, and getting it done.
Yeah, like doing the podcast. Like it's a
Yeah.
small task that literally takes half an hour.
Yeah.
And then that's it.
And like just like other stuff, like just like little like smaller like financial things, logistic things that like it can be easily done in
I
an
think you're
hour
talking
or
to yourself
less.
right now. I think you're talking about yourself right now.
Sure, whatever you
You're
want
not
to
talking about me. 'Cause you know me already. I got my shit done.
whatever you want to call it. So yeah, that's from I guess myself personally, because you don't want to be involved in that. So that's what I want to do for the next little bit, so I can be on track for July moving forward.
Well, I already am involved. Our business, we're in this together. So whatever you do or don't do, it's gonna affect me. So nice try though. But yeah, like overall, like I'm really excited for the next 6 months of the business and everything. So I think it's gonna be really good. I'm happy. It's like the way the business has been transitioning over the last like 4 years. I think it just really goes to show like our resilience as like business people, you know, because there was times where it's been like 3 months, 2 months, 3 weeks where we didn't get any sales, and we're like, yo, what's going on? What are we doing wrong? You know, and I think if we can do another one of those now, we're like, what's going on? What's working so well? That's where we can get to that next level. I have a couple ideas of what I want to do, and like I see like where things are going, because like we've done a bit of like market research, I guess, with like our starter kit for resellers, and we're getting amazing traction on that. People are commenting, people are talking about it. A lot of people have been like, hey, I've seen your picture before, are you that girl that's in that picture or whatever? And I think that's important as long as the awareness is out there, and plus with that awareness we also have good content to back it up as well too. So I think something like that, now I want us to like figure out how can we make it a lot more valuable for our clients without it being tacky or without it being like useless, more or less, you know. And then of course like, there are other aspects as well, like maybe there are some shows we shouldn't do anymore, maybe there's some things we should try to focus on more and stuff like that too, right? For instance, like even like the whole like hype beast stuff, like, you know, a part of me wants to like stay away from that just so but because all the shows that we do for that stuff, it's in the States, right? And of course there's so much more liability when it comes to stuff like that, like logistics, losing stuff, and also like we also have to sell so much more to make like the same amount of profit we would if we were just only selling vintage in Toronto or Ottawa or whatever the case may be, right? So I think like just like closely looking at those things like that, and to see like, does it make sense if we stay away from the hypebeast stuff, or maybe we should just double down more on the hypebeast stuff or whatever, you know? So I want us to really do like a nice breakdown of like what has been working for us. 'Cause I think we kind of have like an idea of what has been working, but we don't necessarily have like a concrete analysis of like, okay, well, when we posted these times with these products,
Like the
we do that
actual
well.
numbers.
Exactly. So like I want us to like really just like have a look at it and be like, okay, crap, like this is working really well, like, you know.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
no, I couldn't agree more. It's like at the end of the day, I feel like we both want to scale our business and get to another level, because I feel like we're at the point where we've kind of like mastered this stage. So it's kind of like,
I wouldn't say mastered. I'm trying to be humble now because I know you're not the humble type. But I'm trying to be a little humble. You know.
no,
It's
mastered isn't. I'm not saying mastered doesn't. At the end of the day,
I think we're ready to go to the next stage.
yeah,
I'll
that's
say
what I'm
that.
saying. At the end of the day, even like the person who has reached, I don't know, enlightenment, you're still learning. Like there's no such thing as like being done with like growing and developing.
Maybe that is enlightenment.
Understanding that you're still learning.
That's beautiful.
Sure. But like at the end of the day,
Nice.
like we've grown
nice.
to this stage and we've been able to kind of understand it and understand the intricacies of it, and we're still developing, and the development that we'll continue to get is also going to help us get to the next level.
And it's crazy though because like we've only been able to get this level and understand that we can go to the next level by being consistent. Because if you're inconsistent at this level here, you're not gonna be able to realize, okay, like what am I doing incorrectly, or what am I doing correctly, so I can either take a step back, refocus, and try to recalibrate this thing, or like hey, it's time to speed things up and go to the next stage and next level of our business.
Yeah, and also at the end of the day, if you're not consistent, you have no data. If you're not consistent, you don't know.
No, you'll have data. You won't have good data though.
Yeah, which good data is
Almost as bad data.
no data, right?
That's better than no data.
You don't have the ability to figure out or extrapolate like what's working, what's not working, how can I be different if you haven't even put in the work in the first place. And I feel like that's where a lot of people get stuck, myself personally sometimes, is that you don't know what work to put in, so you just don't do work at all.
I saw this thing today and it was nice. It's this new page that we're following on kind of on Cole's page. It's called Black Business Empowerment, and the guy had this thing, and it's so true. He was like, overact and underthink, and I think that's one of the biggest things in like a majority of things in life. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, like you see that guy that you want to talk to, but instead of just getting up the courage and go talking to him, you as a woman you may be like, oh, like maybe he does it's like, hey, just do the work and worry about that after. And I think a lot of businesses, especially ours at the beginning and even right now, like we're so worried on like this has to be perfect, that has to be in place, this has to be done, and if that's not done, we can't move on. It's like, hey, like of course when I say underthink, I mean like let's be calculated, but realistically we only need this amount of information to get this task done. But like we'll try to force ourselves with like what is it, paralysis by too much analysis.
Sure.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes if you analyze something too much, you kind of like weaken yourself because like you have too much options to pick from. Instead of doing something, you just wonder about what to do next.
And I think like a lot of that over analysis comes from a fear, or like a fear of whatever you're doing like isn't gonna work or it's not gonna pan out properly. However it pans out is how it's supposed to pan out. And like a lot of the times when I feel like I'm overthinking things, which is usually quite often, I think about a plant. And like I think about the fact that like you water a plant every single day and it grows, right? You don't think about how it's growing, you don't think about why it's growing, you don't think about all of the things that it needs to grow. All you think about is watering, sunlight, cool, it grows, right? So like the same thing applies to like your business or like any goals that you may have. Like if you nurture it and you work towards it and you're steadfast and determined on like making something out of it, you don't really necessarily need to focus on how that's going to happen, because if you put in the action and you put in the work, it's going to pan out into something eventually.
No, that's so true. And it's crazy because I was talking to one of my friends today. After then, we were just talking. I was just like, you know what? If you don't want to do something, you'll find any excuse not to. And I think sometimes that's why people overanalyze. They really don't want to put in the work. They really don't want to fail, you know? So they'll find every excuse to find the right algebraic code, but still won't implement the formula. And that's one thing like I think we've stayed away from. It's like, hey, like trial and error. To me, that's what trial and error is. Trial and error is underthinking, having like a small dose of what is working, and then you can overthink.
And like to me, like one of the things that I always think of is like people have created and continue to create and run like multi-million-dollar businesses off of a lot less information. So like if they can do it, then why can't I? Sometimes too much information isn't necessarily the best thing. Sometimes you kind of have to have like blinders on and just do the work and push forward, and you'll see the work pay off when it pays off.
One thing I want to see a lot of people talk more about in the vintage community, not vintage community, sorry, in the business community, try it, and if it fails, try again. Like we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about like, hey, like okay, then we're just try it again. Like okay, you're not in debt, you didn't die, and you like, no one's feelings are hurt. Like
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting because I feel like a lot of times when people talk about that, they just say the whole saying like, oh, like seven. I don't know. You know that there's that number like, oh, this percentage of businesses fail within their first
70,
year,
yeah.
or like these successful business owners went through like 10 unsuccessful businesses before they got their successful one. And it's like, yeah, like it's cool to like mention stuff like that, but at the same time it focuses on the failure as opposed to focusing on what is learned through that failure, right?
No, I don't see it like that. So for instance, like I'm not sure if we have enough time. So but like the way I see it is that like they're basically saying failure is a part of the success.
Yeah.
Like it's very unlikely that your first thing is gonna be your best thing.
No, I know, but
Like, you know?
I feel like from that
That's the way maybe you want to.
No, but I feel like a lot of the
that way.
times that perspective, sometimes it like archetypes people and it feels like they can't move forward because they're like, oh, well, like instead of having the perspective of trial and error like we have, like failure is part of the process, it's more so like, oh, like, well, I'm likely to fail because this is my first business venture. Like you can be really successful on your first business
which
venture,
is very unlikely.
which is very unlikely.
Yeah.
But why do we have to focus on that?
No, I don't necessarily see this focusing on it, but I think we need to be honest and as authentic as possible. Like, that is a part of it. Understand that like, hey, you're probably gonna hit a wall at some point or fail at some point, but that's not the end. Like failing isn't the end.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that statement, in a sense, like it focuses on.
No, I think it depends on the person. Because, for instance, like from my perspective, I don't think it focuses on that. Maybe for you,
Sure.
you do, right? So I think it just depends on the person. If you're someone that's like a bit like pessimistic, then maybe you might interpret it as, oh yeah, like they're just focused on negatives, and then of course there are other people where it's like, okay, well that's gonna come about. Let's try and like prepare ourselves for this, you know. But before we head out, is there any last words you wanna? Nope. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us this time on Business Pleasure. Until next time, peace.